Hello and welcome to another edition of In Studio on the GNet TV News Project. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director here at GNet TV. It's my pleasure to welcome you here to our studio and also to welcome a distinguished panel of guests who are going to be talking today about Act 46 and the Northshire and the, Taconic and Green merger proposal that many of you will be voting on during town meeting coming up very shortly. As many of you know, the state legislature passed Act 46 a couple of years ago, which encouraged school districts to consider merging together into larger entities. We have a local proposal before us in front of the 9 towns that make up that proposal, comprising 7 school districts: Manchester, Dorset, Sunderland, Mount Tabor, Danby, the Mountain Towns Red. Those towns include Weston, Peru, Landgrove, and Londonderry. And it's going to be quite a change if this proposal is voted through. So here today to talk to us a little bit about what that proposal involves and what might happen are 3 folks who've been following this very closely, I think it's fair to say. First of all, we have John Wilson, who was the chairman of the Northshire Merger Study Committee. They've been meeting together for the past year or so and come up with a proposal that met with approval from the State Board of Education last December. We also have Nancy Wolf, who's a resident of Sunderland, and she was a member of the Northshire Merger Study Committee. And also Jim Salzgiver from Dorset, who is currently a school director from Dorset and is also the chairman of the BRSU committee. Thank all of you for making the time to come and be with us today.
Thank you.
Really important stuff, and I know there's a lot to get to. John, let's look to you to get us started here. Can you give us an overview of the proposal? What are sort of the highlights of it that voters will be making a decision about during town meeting?
Yeah, to answer that, I want to first explain what it is not. It is not about merging schools, okay? It's about merging school districts. So we have the 7 different school districts, and Act 46 encourages school districts to merge. And what that means is rather than having 7 different boards and 7 different budgets and tax rates, that you'll have 1 budget, 1 board, and 1 tax rate eventually. And so if you remember back in 2012, Landgrove, Londonderry, Peru, and Weston, those towns came together and then they voluntarily merged under this, it's Act 153. And they merged into a regional education district. And they were, I think, the only ones in the state to do that. And before that, town meetings across the state, I can't remember how many, maybe around 50 town meetings voted down school budgets. And that was a signal, and the state legislature took that as a signal that we need to do something. So they tried Act 153 to try to incentivize a merger. That didn't go so well, considering that only Mountain Towns Red were the only merger there. But the Mountain Towns Red has been happy with that merger. So those 4 towns came together, and now there were 4 separate districts that were operating Floodbrook. And now they're 1 district operating Floodbrook. So after no one merged except for Mountain Towns Red, Act 46 came along that had more teeth, essentially. And we're looking at merging the Mountain Towns Red, Manchester, Dorset, Sunderland, Danby, Mount Tabor, and Mount Tabor and Danby make up Union District 23 as well. So those are the many districts there, and so it's it's a very complex system. But this committee has done an amazing job at developing a proposal that will create a 13-member board where every town is guaranteed a representation. And I think we've developed something. When we voted on this proposal, it was unanimously voted on by the 17-member committee, and I think that speaks volumes about the confidence that we had in the proposal we came up with.
Yeah, I think one thing that's sort of important to understand is that we've had a very significant change in the way we operate our schools over the past decade. It was really when Dan French came in as superintendent about 10 years ago, and I've been on the Dorset board, the BRSU board for the past 9 years, so I've been able to see most of this. And 10 years ago, each of our schools operated really on a standalone basis. And over the past 10 years, we've moved to where our schools really operate as what Dan always liked to call it, an educational system. So our individual schools, we have this shift from individual siloed schools to an educational system. It's also important to recognize this happened really with the leadership of the supervisory union, but with the support of all those individual boards. So the Dorset board, the Manchester, all the other boards, supported this move. And what that meant is, in the olden days, each principal ran their own school, and it was sort of on a standalone basis. Today, our principals across all of our schools get together on a monthly basis. They support, they share ideas. Our teachers from across all the schools, they get together on a regular basis. We have at the SU something we call the instructional leadership team that draws people, education professionals from all the different schools together to work on projects that are going to be applied to all the schools, to benefit education in all the schools. We've centralized our business services, our special education, management, transportation, technology. We're operating as a system right now. So, one of the important things to recognize, I think, is that the people get concerned about this being a major change. It's actually not probably going to be a major change in the way we run our schools, because they are run as a group right now. But I think one of the significant changes that we are going to have that is beneficial, if the voters decide to do this merger, is that currently, as John said, we've got all those 7 boards, those 7 budgets, etc. At the supervisory union level, I've heard numbers in the past, the superintendent spending somewhere 30 to 40% of their time on governance, just dealing with all those boards. We've got a business manager who has to manage 7 different sets of books, 7 budgets, 7 audits, etc. One of my personal hopes anyway from this is if we come together, that we actually, I think the supervisory union's done a lot to help improve education, to improve efficiency in operations at the BRSU. And my hope is that if you take away a lot of that time and effort that's putting together all those agendas every month, going to all those meetings, superintendent almost every night during the month. If you take away that, actually you free up a lot of resources to spend towards more useful pursuits in improving, the efficiency of our schools and the quality of education to kids.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that we met with the principals early on, and we've had a lot of support even in forums from current faculty talking about they're looking forward to even more of the collaboration that they're doing and looking at opportunities as you consider that one of the goals is equity of opportunities, educational projects and programs, so that it's possible that schools like Sunderland might have Spanish because that's already in Floodbrook in the elementary levels. So there's a possibility and even a probability that the board is going to need to consider how to make the programs equitable for all students across the district. So I think that's a place, or art and music, even on a future opportunity that there'll be interscholastic sports or an all-district chorus, places for kids and parents also to intermingle and the community to enlarge in a positive way. So I think those are our other pieces of the benefits when we look at the students too.
It sounds like one of the big differences then is that instead of having 7 or 8 or 9 individual school boards, now we're going to have one school board running the entire program across all the 7 districts and 9 towns. 13 members on that board. I guess I was wondering if one of you could talk a little bit about how this board is going to be made up. I know there are going to be at-large members and there are going to be members from each town. Looking at some of the ballots that I've seen so far at the various town meetings is going to be kind of different from what I think a lot of folks are used to seeing. And I was wondering if someone could sort of walk us through how How does that play out?
So there's going to be a 13-member board if this merger goes through. And so we have 9 towns. So every town is guaranteed a seat on that board. Okay, and then we have these 4 other seats for the board, and those are up for grabs amongst the 4 largest towns. That's Manchester, Dorset, Londonderry, and Danby. And so to be eligible for one of those seats, you need to be a resident of one of those 4 communities. And the top vote getters will get those 4 seats. And so to understand why we have it's a pretty different structure, and it was I thought we came to a creative compromise here. To understand why it is this way, it's important to understand that the challenge that we faced, that we have a town like Mount Tabor or Landgrove, you only got a few hundred people in each of those communities. And then Manchester's got over 4,000 people. So the relative differences in size was a challenge for us. And so Landgrove or Mount Tabor, right, they don't want to be totally overpowered. If we went totally proportional representation, they didn't want to be overpowered. And Manchester wanted, for example, or some of the larger towns, they don't want to be underrepresented. So this is where we came to a compromise, saying, okay, everyone's guaranteed at least one, but then we have these 4 other seats that will be up for grabs amongst the 4 largest towns. Now, we thought that was a great way to do it. Because we would have what's called at-large voting. So all 13 seats, everyone in all the towns, all the voters, you can vote for every seat. So I'm going to repeat that in the camera. You can vote for every seat on the ballot, not even if it's out of your town. And please do, right? And we wanted that because we want people to be able to pay attention. If you're from Dorset, to pay attention who is the Landgrove rep, right? They're going to be representing a board that is, responsible for all of the kids in the district, and so we want to break down like this. We thought this would help to break down this town boundary, and help to add to the sense of, okay, we all have to pay attention to this. If we're all in one school district here, okay, we all have to pay attention to who's running, and we want good competition here, and so this was a good way to do it, we thought, and I feel good about the compromise we reached.
I think, I was going to say, I think it took us hours to come to that, and I feel like we were very thoughtful, responsible, respectful of the various size communities too, and I think the thing that's the biggest change that everybody's going to have to get used to is the fact that it's really a board that is responsible for all the kids in all the districts. It's not going to be specifically a representative of that town, although certainly that person is going to be most well versed on the needs of the school in that particular town.
So translation, local control is going to be not as good as it used to be. Is that anything that you feel is a legitimate concern, or or is that just simply the way it is?
I understand that perspective. I understand that's a concern for some. I firmly believe that control is a function of the number of choices and options that you have. And so when I was on that, it was a really tough budget year. When I was the last year, I was on the Manchester School Board, and we had supervisory union assessments that were out of our control, and the number of secondary students came in, which we can't really control that, and that we ran a deficit because of that. And so essentially our options were, do we raise taxes a little bit or do we cut, okay? And there was all these other external factors and variables that were influencing our decisions that we had no control over. I certainly did not feel like I had much control of our destiny then, right? And so with this merger, I think one really important, what most people don't understand, and I didn't understand this until I got on the Manchester School Board, with we really value 9 through 12 school choice in our communities. People like that, right? But there's a bit of a hidden cost to that, in that the school boards each school district has to predict the number of students that are coming in every budget year. So this year, for example, Manchester School Board, or last year, we chose a number, and there were 25 more students came in, secondary students, than predicted. So you're going to run a big deficit because of that.
And Dorset has exactly
And
the
Dorset,
same
they have
problem
it,
this
yeah.
year.
And Dorset had the
Yeah,
same
so
We
problem.
budgeted for 94 kids. We ended up with 110 going to
Yeah.
high school.
And so that's why.
And so another thing with that is but the Mountain Towns Red, right? They have 10 fewer than they budgeted
Right.
for. So if you were to, so that creates a huge amount of volatility, right? And so that volatility, the more volatile your tax rate is, right, that you lose control there. So if with the merged district, we expect that volatility, that fiscal volatility, will be ameliorated because Mountain Towns Red and Manchester Dorset, those might cancel each other out. And plus, these kids, there's not just new kids moving in. They're moving from Manchester to
place to the
Londonderry,
other.
right? And so this is causing a lot of difficulties to predict and have a long-term vision, right? And so when you have that stability, hopefully we can have more control.
Yeah.
Because
I think
it'll be
it's
one
gonna-
budget too. Right?
Yeah, I think it'll be very significant. If you look at, one of the things we did a couple of years ago was we centralized special education. And to some extent, special ed used to be one of the items that really caused volatility in individual districts' budgets. It doesn't, this year, it isn't special ed that's having a big impact because now we share that across. And if you look at it, Dorset is a district of like 300 students. And if we merge, we'll be over 1,700 students. So you're spreading all those impacts over such a larger group. And so where special ed in the past used to hit individual schools, now it's not really because we put that all together in one bucket. But still student numbers, Manchester and Dorset both got actually creamed on our budgets this year just by extra high school students moving in. And we love having more students move in, but at the same time, it's really tough on a budget. And if you put that together into one 1,700 plus student district, those, even if I think on a supervisory union-wide basis, we had a significant increase in the number of high school students, so there wasn't total offset. But you end up, for our having 16 extra high school students in a district of 300. If you end up having
Times
an extra
17,000.
35 students over 1,700 students,
Yeah.
it doesn't impact you as much. That's definitely a benefit.
Well, and I think too, just bringing up taxes in general is the whole fact. Is the reality is Act 46 has carrot and stick, and one of the
Yep.
carrots is the incentives for a tax benefit over the next 4 years, the first 4 years of the merger, and so that matters. I mean,
Yep.
and then hopefully over the 4 years, that stabilization that we're talking about should be pretty much in place. And of course, Sunderland has a particularly great tax situation because of our being able to use impact aid funds to reduce our taxes for the upcoming year to based on $1, which is the lowest it can get to, and then 5% for 4 years. If we don't merge, then, or if the merger doesn't come off for any particular reason, that incentive is lost really forever, and down the road, the Act 46 says that in 2019, the state will determine who's going to merge with whom. So when you talk about local control, you have the potential of no control and not really having the opportunity to choose your own destiny and to look at what the benefits are. So it's hard to say that, the known is better than the unknown all the time, but it does feel in this situation that there are a fair number of knowns that make the decision to merge. Partly, it took us until November to decide to have the vote on should we even merge. We were working all the way through on the language in the proposal, but it wasn't a done deal that we would all even agree until November. So, and that's because we think the benefits outweigh the unknowns.
Folks from 9 different communities, 9 different towns get together, 17 of them together, and get along. And it was really, what has already been kind of alluded to. The folks from the big towns were worried about what the issues were for the smaller towns. There was no, this is ours, and the group worked very well together. But I think out of those meetings, a couple of things that really stood out to me were when they had the principals in, and the principals, were essentially, it was you wanted to know what the educators felt about this whole thing, and I think the principals, they had a few reservations, but for the most part, they were very positive. Their reservations were things like, what if we get a bad board member? Then it might be even worse than when we have all these boards. But from the standpoint of educational opportunities and working together, they were very positive on it. And then another thing was Meadowy is not a part of this merger, but they came to a meeting at Floodbrook, and a bunch of the teachers from Meadowy brought a letter that they had put together as a group to essentially say at that point they were concerned that the structure might come together and they would be left out. So they came specifically to essentially plead their case for being a part of this overall structure in the end.
In the BRSU,
union.
basically, that
Because
that
the
we were,
BRSU will
because our
remain.
district would be a subset of BRSU still, and I think they were worried that if we became our own school district, then that they would be cut out, and so, and we realize that it's up to the state ultimately, but we also realize that our preference was to be part of BRSU, just for the sheer cost it would be to have our own school district. And I think the small schools, even in the proposals, trying to acknowledge that Danby, Mount Tabor, Sunderland are K-6. So we know that it's going to come to pass. There'll be a handful of parents in those schools when they go to choose 7th grade won't be able to choose the same schools that they have been, because they'll have to choose a school within a district. So that's a challenge, and I think it's going to take a bit to get used to it, and I'm not being cavalier about it because I heard parents talking about it the other night, and they have justified reasons, but it's really important then that 9 to 12, that choice is there still for all of us, and the current students are grandfathered in to stay where they are. We surely don't want to be disruptive to that education, and so I think it's the piece, one of the pieces that's a challenge for the small schools, but I think the ultimate overall benefits to all the students being part of one group for all the reasons John and Jim have talked about.
Yeah, I think that, to your last point there, concerning all the students, when we get in the weeds here, some of the viewers may say, what about the kids, right? And it's important to note that if you came to any of our committee meetings, that was the top of the agenda. What does this mean for kids? And that was not lost on us. And we kept that kept coming back around. And merger, if there's a merger goes through, we'll have a new board, and they'll have to make a lot of decisions about policy and what the future will look like of these schools. So at least a lot of these decisions aren't up to us, right? But we did feel that a merger could potentially unlock a lot of innovation and possibility for innovation. And Jim spoke about how under Dan French's leadership, there's been a lot of centralization already. And I think most would agree that there's been good outcomes from that. I think that's really important for voters when they walk in, first of all, to go to, read our FAQs that we put on our website. If you Google Northshire Merger Study Committee, you can go online and find our website, and follow us on Facebook as well. And to read the proposal as well, if they can get, it's a big proposal, but for them to think about two things. First of all, what does it mean if we vote yes and we merge, okay? So that's the things we've been talking about a lot tonight. The second thing is, what does it mean if we vote no? Okay, that's a really important consideration, and Nancy spoke about it before a little bit, that there's a very, very strong likelihood that we'll have to merge anyway, that the state will make us merge down the line.
There's many questions left to toss around here, and we're kind of running low on time, but I just wanted to ask one that I think some voters may be confused about when they go into the voting booths on town meeting. The difference between necessary and advisory towns. If one necessary town votes no,
It's all over.
That's
it
it.
sinks the entire proposal.
Yes.
But there's opportunity for a revote potentially, right? If we have until
till June.
Merger needs to happen before
July
July
1st.
1 if it's going to happen. So there'll be a possibility for one revote, I imagine.
And I think the advisable piece is because of the smallness of Danby, Mount Tabor, Sunderland, and not wanting to feel like we're pushing those smaller districts into saying yes so they don't mess everything up for everybody else, and also because we have a different problem, we have a different issue to consider, the school choice one in particular, and it's not because we don't matter, and that it's because we do matter, and because we want the committee wanted to give us some.
Those communities
more
have a harder
autonomy.
choice than Manchester, Dorset, and Mountain Towns, because they do have the 7-8 choice. And that is
Yeah.
a fundamental. I think that's sort of recognized that you could understand a community having difficulty with that. I think that it still, a lot of us think that it would make a lot of sense and make sense for the long run, but at the same time big towns don't want to try to make that decision for the towns that
Right.
are actually affected. I mean that goes back to local control. Actually. Want to let those towns
Right.
have the opportunity.
So if one of the advisory towns votes no, where does that leave them? The merger would still go forward if all three.
Well, but then the point is they also could have a revote before July 1st, or they have to come up with a proposal by November of 2017 of what might be another option, that's very limited, or we just wait and hold our breath and see what happens in 2019 if the state decides that structure,
To me, one of the tough things with that is that we're talking about merging together to create a K-8 with choice 9 to 12, and if the three schools do that, come together as K-8, choice 9 to 12, and if either of the others don't, then actually unless what actually happens to them when the state does decide what to do is the state is going to be looking to merge them with another K-6, which is going to mean that the new Taconic and Green is not the likely home for them.
No.
Right.
And I think that to me is one of the.
No.
I mean, we've having been on the BRSU all these years, I think actually our schools and our boards work really well together. And I think there's been a great benefit by putting this system
Sure.
together. And I think to all of us, the idea of having that, it's for me from Dorset. I don't want to see Courier or Sunderland cease to be a part of the same structure that we're a part of. I think there's a benefit to us all being together. So.
Well, there's a lot more I'm sure we could cover if we had more time, but we're going to have to leave it at that for today. Fortunately, we have a couple of forums coming up in the near future between now and town meeting. I know February 28th over in Sunderland at
Yeah.
the elementary school. I think it starts at 6:30.
Yeah.
And then March
March
1st?
2nd.
March 2nd.
At Manchester Community Library at 6:30.
Okay. And that one is designed for
Everyone.
Everyone.
Yep.
Yeah, the idea is everybody should, if they haven't been to
Right.
one, try to go to that
Yes,
one.
please
and,
do come,
And
yes.
ask
Yeah,
questions and get informed. Read your town report, because all the town reports have 4 or 5 pages of information.
Yeah, please
So
don't
on,
expect to
so-
walk into the ballot box and see this massive, the ballot's really long, right?
And it doesn't tell you much
and it's,
about
and it's
46.
complex, all right? And so unless you're going to be in there for 4 hours.
And not helpful.
It's not very helpful to
Yeah.
understand it, right? So please do your homework beforehand.
And also be sure to vote for candidates, because if the merger, when the merger takes place, you want to have had your say
You wanna have some
in
directors in
the
place.
directors will
Okay.
be
And this would actually take effect then, assuming this all is approved, in 2018.
July 1st. Yeah, but the boards will
That's-
begin meeting.
The board would
begin
be
meeting.
created. The board would start right away and start working on getting ready for in 2018. That's when the old boards would go away and the new board would take over the whole system.
Because those folks will also be voting for school directors for
local
one more
board,
year for their
right.
local boards.
I'm on both ballots.
All right. Well, good luck.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Jim
Thank you.
Salzgiver, Nancy Wolf, John Wilson. Real pleasure
Sandra.
having you here today to shed some light on this topic. I'm sure we'll have a lot of voters there going, what's going on here?
Yeah.